Welcome to Equity Is, a podcast from the School District of Philadelphia's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This podcast is about cultivating prosperity and liberation for students and staff. We do this by showcasing and debriefing on the great equity work that is being done throughout the School District of Philadelphia community. With each episode, we hope to cover topics that will create pathways for marginalized populations in our district by removing barriers, increasing access and inclusion, building trust, and creating a shared culture of social responsibility and organizational accountability. I am your host, Tori Potenza, the Program Manager for the Office of DEI. This episode will be looking at the Transitional Mentoring Program. This is a pilot program that just wrapped its first year at Martin Luther King High School in the East Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia. This program is a collaborative effort between the Office of Students' Rights and Responsibilities and the Office of School Safety. According to the office, this program works in collaboration with the student, family, and transitional team. The goal of this program is to ensure that we are making our best effort to ensure that the student transitions into a safe, welcoming environment where his or her academic, behavioral, and social skills thrive. We will work to ensure that the student is given high expectations, coping skills, and the ability to succeed in accomplishing goals. To begin our discussion, I am joined by Tico Gilliam, one of the case managers for the transitional program through the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities. All right, I am here with Tico Gilliam. To begin our conversation, would you mind talking a little bit more about your role in the program?
Well, let me say my position. I'm a case manager for the Student Transition Center. And basically that entails I work with students who are placed out of the district for 30 days or longer. That's how they get assigned to me. So this is actually my first year as a case manager for the school district. And when we got started this school year, Dr. Bond had told me that there was going to be a pilot program about, the mentoring program. They're going to pilot it out of King. So that's how I got to meet with Jamil. And from that point on, from this school, we kind of, everyone that came into the program through the transition center, as far as, the case management, I directed them to the mentoring program as well. So that's how we started kind of collaborating with students.
Thank you for sharing that. Would you mind speaking a little bit more about your reflections on this first year of the program and any positive outcomes you've seen from this first year?
I think it's very helpful. And keep in mind, I have different schools, so King's not my only school. I think it's very helpful as far as communication with the students I work with. The students that come in with King, I play the case manager role, mentoring, and, even though I have a counseling background, things of that nature, there's only so much you have to kind of walk the fine line. And having the mentoring program, it's not as formal as far as when kids want to express themselves. And if they feel like things they don't want to tell me, they're able to, they tell Jamil, especially with like conflict resolutions, things of that nature. I mean, they look at both of us as staff, but they kind of look at me differently. I'm kind of like counselor or a teacher or a principal, like school staff, and Jamil's like a safe space, if that makes sense. So I think when I identify problems and I address them, it's really good that I, hand it off to Jamil, who could kind of dig into the root of those problems. And a lot of times they'll discover things that they didn't tell me that was going on. So it's been very helpful. And most of the students, I would say actually every student that I've worked with here in King was very receptive to Jamil and his program. So there was, the kids that they may have gotten situations where they had to leave school, but it was never due to service that me and Jamil was providing, but they were always receptive of it. And they always reached out to us, even when things at home and things in community were affecting them, they always came to us for help. We try to work through the problems the best we could.
Could you speak to how many students are currently in the program? And do you see this being a program that would be able to be expanded?
Yeah, I see that. Well, keep in mind, when I get kids through the program, I only keep them 90 days or 30 days, depending on if they come through this Camelot school. I only keep them for 30 days. If they come outside of Camelot, or they come in just as placement, I have them 90 days. So I'll say, this is an estimate, probably serviced maybe about 30 kids total that have come through King through the program. Right now, end of the year, technically I have 3 that are active, and there's another 3 or 4 kids who never came to school, and I don't think they're going to come to school. So that's 3 active basically right now. We probably worked with about 30 through the school year.
Now, I know you said about 30 total from this year. Are you looking for more expansion at the program that's currently existing at Martin Luther King, or are you hoping that this is a program that will expand to other schools?
Probably more expansion in the other schools. That would be best. Pretty much at King, we can only service the only ones that come through, the transition. And sometimes some years it's going to be more and some years will be less. But I think being that I work at other schools, I can honestly say that I would love to have that program in my other schools as well.
So, reflecting on this year of the Transitional Mentoring Program, could you speak to any changes you've noticed for the students who are a part of the program or changes that you've noticed in the school culture in general?
Well, this year was a really tough year. Kids been out for 2 years, basically out of classroom for almost 2 years. So it was more than what people expect, I'll say, as far as the behaviors of the students. I can say that with the program here, even kids that are outside of the transition program, they seem receptive to me, and especially to Jamil. And he's actually reached out to others, not just through our program, but through just identifying kids that may need help or show some concerning behaviors or things of that nature. So I think we've kind of created a culture where outside of the normal staff, you can kind of come to us if you have any concerns of things of that nature. We've kind of created a safe space for that, I can say. Now, I do have a job, so there's only so much I can do. But I definitely, when kids come and they need help or they have concerns, I definitely help them as much as I can, and Jamil does as well. So I think we've probably become 2 more people in the building that kids can come to outside of staff and they feel comfortable with.
So, to wrap up our conversation, I would like to ask, are there any stories or moments from this past year you can speak of that really solidified the impact of this program for you?
There's a lot. I will say one story in particular. We had a young man came through the transition program, and he was actually doing pretty well in school. His issues were getting trouble outside in the community. So I was in contact with him, and I kept in contact with his mother and grandmother regularly. So, we would talk a lot. And, we would notice that his attendance started dipping off a little bit, and he started coming to school later. And, we found out that he's pretty much been hanging on the wrong crowd and doing the wrong things. So much to the point that it got him in trouble with some people outside the community. So when I talked to him first, I noticed something was wrong, but I kind of got part of the story, but didn't get the whole story. But I knew that there was some trouble going on. So then after I talked to the kid, Jamil talked to him and he got the full story. And then we learned that it was like, okay, this is really a crisis situation. Like, this kid's safety may be in jeopardy. So I reached out to let his mother and grandmother know, because they had no idea. And especially if it's in the community, that means danger can come right at the door. So something that they really had to know. We didn't feel comfortable telling them, but I told them because it was an issue. And Jamil, he reached out to a mediation team in the community. They do community work. They do mediation. They kind of like work out problems between peers in the community, and just so it wouldn't turn to a violent act. So Jamil ended up he pulled that agency in. They did a mediation between our kid, and it was a grown man, a young grown man, but grown, because our kid was like 15, 16. So it was still really shouldn't have been associated with, but that agency, they mediated the situation, and then his safety was no longer an issue once that situation got resolved. So that was one of the really good stories. Yes.
I think that's all I have. Are there any parting words you would like to offer about the program before we wrap up?
Just that I think it's effective. Not only are we able to service kids here, we're able to them to outside agencies in the community that can help them as well. Because we all know once we get outside of school, it's a whole nother world. We've been pretty effective as far as trying to get kids what they need, refer them to where they need to go. But it's still tough either way because still outside forces, community, families, they have I try not to get upset with or blame myself or the work we do, but then I realized that there's stronger forces out there that have that have an effect on the students. So I just try to keep that in mind.
So, for this last part of the podcast, I am joined by Dr. Bond, who is the Director of Operations for the Student Transition Center, as well as Keisha Wilkins, who is the principal of Martin Luther King High. They were both able to provide their perspectives on how this first year of the program went.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
So I guess just to get more background on the program itself, Dr. Bond, I'd love to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about how the mentoring program came about, as well as the collaboration efforts between your office and the Office of Safety as well.
Absolutely. So again, thank you so much for having us today. The Student Transition Center is a centralized welcome center that we have here at Central Office for students that are returning back from various placements, whether it be delinquent placements, dependent placements, it could be a long-term hospitalization, as well as returning back from a long-term stay at our youth detention center. And what we've done is we have a team of individuals who support those students as they transition back. So we have transition liaisons that will assign students to schools. And then over the past about 5 years now, we have a case manager. So we have a case management model that was implemented to provide support to students as they're transitioning back from those various placements. And we know that a lot of our students have been institutionalized. So we try to make sure that there is an advocate or someone that is attached to that student that can help advocate for students and work with our school administrators and school teams as they do transition to the school buildings and providing some guidance, goal setting, and identifying those key resources. So what happened was last summer, I actually was at a conference with my deputy, Rachel Holzman, who's the deputy of Office of Student Rights and Responsibility, as well as Chief Kevin Bethel, who's the chief of Office of School Safety. And we realized that a lot of the work that we're doing in school buildings, we're kind of doing it in silos, right? So we decided that we wanted to come together and collaborate on some efforts. So from the transition standpoint of providing that case management model, and then Kevin Bethel and his team offering mentoring in some of the elementary schools through their LEAD program, we figured it would be a great way to transition and collaborate on efforts on an initiative, a pilot program that we could do that our case manager and then an identified team member on his team, who is Jamil Sloan, Officer Sloan, he actually is the mentor. We decided that just looking at the data that we have in the schools that we serve, obviously Martin Luther King High School is a school because of where it's located and where our students who are transitioning back reside. We send a lot of students to Principal Wilkins and her team. And we figured it would be a great way for us to start there as a pilot program. So we literally reached out to Principal Wilkins over the summer, met with her and her team and said, hey, this is something that we wanted to do. We want to not only provide transition case management, but we also want to identify a key mentor that's coming from the Office of School Safety that can be a part of your school community on a day-to-day basis, and also provide extra resources to the school as well as the students that we transition. And that is really how this came about, was really about some of us here at Central Office just trying to come together, more of a collaborative approach. And when we identify key resources, we wanted to make sure that our students will have those additional staff members that could not only be coming from the central office, but also become members of the school community. And Principal Wilkins has been very welcoming of allowing our staff to just come, be a part of that school community and really invest in different ways to provide resources and support. So that is really how this came about. The mentoring program to be expanded into a high school was really through our collaboration with our two offices and collaborating with Principal Wilkins and her team.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love hearing about collaborative efforts. So hearing how all of you came together to work on this is so great to hear. Now, Principal Wilkins, from your perspective as a school leader, I'd love to hear what it was like watching this program be implemented within your school. And what does that look like for you day to day?
To be honest, I was happy to receive the additional support from central office. I think that we had, as a school, already prioritized those students who were adjudicated, who were coming from residential treatment, who were coming back into a full-time school setting and may not have been comfortable with the transition. Some of the students that we get through the program were former King students. Maybe they were here in ninth grade, they came back at 11th. Systems change, school level folks change. It just really we just needed to find a way to consistently welcome our students, let them know that their past is their past and that our priority is graduation and fulfillment of whatever goals and dreams that they have. So we already had some folks, boots to the ground, counselors. We have STEP team members, climate support, myself, and roster chair and other folks that really dug in when our kids came in terms of conversations about credit attainment, attendance expectations, leaving negative behaviors and ideas of negative behaviors in the past. So what this program did was get all of the pieces together. Like she said, this happens across the district. We all get students who return to our school and need some additional support, need a transition process, because we think that kids, although they're really resilient, they still need a clear path to graduation, especially in high school. So the program, what it did was it put everybody on notice, right? So it wasn't like my counselors calling this school or to this program and saying, hey, can you offer us some support for this student, or trying to find out what KUA worker was responsible for the kid, or if they were involved with DHS, or if they had a probation officer. Like, all of those pieces are important to the child being guided properly through the pathway to graduation. So it just pulled all of the resources into one pot where we can all meet together. We're all on the same page. We know what the expectations are. We're able to communicate that with the families, and everybody's saying the same thing. So it has been a positive in terms of everything being in one space, because we have been trying. Well, we were doing it. I won't say trying. I have a great team that worked really hard to make sure that we welcomed all of our students coming back with fidelity. But again, just having all of the moving parts in one place just makes it a great way to welcome the kids back and for them to feel like they are supported outside of anything else that they may have been going through.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I think a lot of these questions are ones that both of you can answer from your different perspectives, but more broadly speaking, when we talk about equity seems to look like a lot of different things. It looks different person to person, office to office, school to school. So how do you feel this program advances equity within the school?
So I think from a transition standpoint, we try to make sure that our students that have been placed in various placements, we understand that these are students that are coming from all of our neighborhoods, and oftentimes they're forgotten about in the community. And sometimes when they get back into school buildings, if the resources are not set up and services are not identified, they get lost in the school building. And then we try to make sure that we as a district office, that we are creating different policies and procedures, and we're implementing and strategizing around ways to better assess the needs of our students, to earlier on identify what the resources are currently. To Principal Wilkins' point, our transition case manager will help facilitate a transition meeting with the school team, and then bring in all of the school key players. We bring in Jamil as our mentor. Then we bring in KUA, we bring in DHS, we bring in probation as much as we can, right? We try to bring in all of the key stakeholders that are involved in our students' lives, and make sure they will all not only come together to strategize and help the student create goals, but we want to also to hold each other accountable, that we have to play our part in this, that our young people definitely need our support, and ways in which we can help build their confidence, and again, help them restore and come back to school communities, their own family communities, and find ways that we can give them the skills that they need in order to better transition. So I think from us is really providing their holistic approach and explaining to students their rights, that they have a right to come back to a school building. We also look at, even with them coming back to a school building, what are some other options that are available to you, whether it's a credit recovery program, an accelerated program, but we want to have that holistic conversation, and that is coming from a caring place, right? We want to make sure that we're advocating being caring adults, and working closely with Principal Wilkins and her team. We definitely have been able to leverage the adults in the building to best support our students, and that we are identifying and supporting them with the resources that they need.
I would also agree. I would say that when I look at it from a school lens, that it's about letting our students know that they still have the same access to programs, the same access to the resources at the school, social development, personalized learning, and just opportunities for advancement at the school level. I think a lot of times our kids come back and they are disenfranchised walking in, thinking that we're going to, classify them or quantify their time in that place and have that be the only thing that we see when they present themselves. So I think for us, it's really just sitting down and, like Dr. Bond said, making sure that they see that all of the pieces are there for them, that we're all here for support, and that the accountability is not only on us as the resource providers, but as for them also as students to be accountable for their behaviors and knowing that there are people that they can go to when they have issues. A guy like Jamil Sloan being a mentor is a big deal for these kids because they tell him a lot more than they tell a probation officer, right? Because there's no recourse for telling him, whereas if something is going on in their household or in their community, or they feel like they're leaning towards going another way, to tell their probation officer or even tell a co-worker, it may come with some consequences as opposed to, an opportunity to learn from the experience, grow, and then figure out a way to make it better. So that's what it looks like, at least from our standpoint. It's just personalizing the process for the kids. So it's a standard process in terms of who's available, but it's personalized based on what the child needs, what their level of communication is, and then having a mentor, having a case manager to check on them, and knowing that the principal is available, right? Because the kids come to me a lot too. I'm a boots to ground type of person, and they know that. So if they come to my office and I'm not here, they know they can find me out on the floor. And that's really important to me. So being in those meetings, and I wouldn't even say just having a say, because to me, having a say is really being a voice for the student that we're helping. So that's what that looks like for us as a school.
I love that personalization aspect you mentioned, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all approach. And I'm sure that helps students one-on-one feel their needs are being met, which is really lovely to hear. I'd love to hear too, since implementing the program, what changes have you both noticed with the students that you're working with?
I would say just that communication piece is important. One of the biggest indicators of success is when something is going on and the student feels comfortable enough to say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with and I need help. So for me, it's knowing that they are using the resources that are provided. I also want to be clear that a lot of times, so this is what I say to our students. 24 hours in a day, 7 hours and 4 minutes. If you're on time, and we do tell them be on time. If you're in a school building, we have 7 hours and 4 minutes a day to help you become a better, stronger, more viable person in life and community and everything else. But there's also 17 hours that you have to go back to being what other people expect of you. So our 7 hours and 4 minutes are really standard practice for what life should be for you, right? It's knowing how to code switch, and our kids are learning how to do that. Like, society expects me to be this way. My family expects me to be this way. My neighborhood expects me to be this way. And school is helping me put all of these pieces together in a positive way so that when I go back to those 17 hours, which may not be a good 17 hours, that I'm able to still communicate about what I like, what I dislike, what I'm going to do, and what my goals are. So what I've seen in terms of communication with students when things are going on, something as simple as an airdrop, like, Miss, there's this and that going on. Can I airdrop this video to you? Or can I give you this? Or can I show you that? They want to be in a safe space, and they realize that this is a safe space for them. Safe mentally, safe physically, so much so that I have to put kids out, it's time to go home, go home, bye. Love you, see you, bye. That's what I tell them at the end of the day. And that's a big deal for high school kids. Usually they cut and they're gone. Our kids are like, I'm leaving out at 5. I'm like, so you're just going to sit on the bench? They're like, yeah, we're good. And that's really a big deal because, one, we know that they, again, believe that this and know that this is a safe space. 2, they trust us with them physically, mentally, and they know that we're going to sustain our communications, our expectations, and all of those things it's a sustainable process. And then also that they feel open to communicate when things are going right and when they're not, and when they're feeling like going back into a situation that they know is not a good situation for them, that they're able to communicate that as well. So, and Mr. Sloan has been like a godsend when it's come to some kids have gotten into some situations, or they come out of placement and it's, although they've changed and they've learned some strategies, same thing with that 7 hours, they're going back into a place where we haven't necessarily given parents or guardians or family members that same level of care. And so for us, it's about candor and care. Like, I'm going to be honest with you about what this looks like, and then I'm going to carefully show you how to work through this process and show other people how to get there. So the fact that kids are communicating, it means a lot. These are high school kids that parents will tell you that they don't communicate with them. And sometimes they'll tell us more than they would tell a parent or a guardian or, even a sibling or friend. And that means that it's working.
That's so inspiring to hear. That was never my high school experience. Can't imagine staying after and hanging out with my teachers or principal, or having that level of accessibility is really great.
I saw my principal all the time and I would be like, oh no, not our kids. They're like, Miss Wilkins, like screaming across the street. And it makes you feel good and know that they value what you put into them. And so they're willing to be different than they probably even expect to be when it comes to an adult in a school.
I'd love to hear from both of you as well. What wins or aha moments have there been, or moments that really solidified the impact of this work that you're both doing?
I think for me, the win is that we were able to transfer a lot of what we were doing here at Central Office, like the efforts that we're doing across the district, right? Being able to transfer that on the ground. My vision may be one thing and my team vision about how this should look, right? But we always are having focus groups with our principals. We're always trying to get feedback from them on what's working, what's not working. And I think a win for us is not just about just collaborating, right? But actually doing the work together. So while, Principal Wilkins and I are working together, and Chief Bethel and Deputy Holzman, like, they're working together for us to make sure that this gets done. Case manager Tico Gilliam, as well as Jamil Sloan, like, as the case manager and mentor, are working together. It really trickles down on the efforts and the vision, but the guidance that we're providing and the examples that we're setting. So the win for me is really just the fact that we've been able to collaborate and do this work and bring all these individuals together on one common goal. And it really is about our young people in our communities. Principal Wilkins will tell you, like, we've had plenty of focus groups. We heard what principals have to say, and we've been trying to slowly implement with increasing staff that's here at Central Office, increasing and expanding our model as much as we can, so that, again, we're doing more of a comprehensive assessment of what students need, but we're doing a smoother transition in this process. So for me, the wins are about allowing our young people to communicate and advocate for themselves appropriately, and then infuse and reintegrate back into school communities that are accepting of them. So anytime a principal can tell me that our young people are communicating better and are becoming a part of a school environment and not being labeled as delinquent and dependent, to me, that just drives me crazy, the fact that we even have to label students that way. We were trying to be intentional about how we message, identify the students that are transitioning back, because while they may have come from these various placements, they are still part of our communities and they're still part of our school communities. So I think for me, the win has really been about the collaboration, the advocacy that we've been able to do, and the continued messaging and supporting of student success has been really, really important. So the collaboration effort from 440 that then was able to trickle down into a school building, so that both our team members, our mentor and our case manager, could even work closely with Principal Wilkins. And she's not lying when she says she's boots on the ground. When I visited the school, I had to find her in the hallway. We had to track her down, call her over, because she really is in the midst of doing the work with her team. And we can never say that we can't find her. She's somewhere in that building with some young people. So I do appreciate the fact that we've been able to do this work and pilot it here so that we can hopefully then do it in other schools.
I think the win for us is just having folks note that we did need some assistance. I think a lot of times being in leadership, you want help, but you don't know how to ask for help in a way that is not seen as unable to manage or handle, if that makes sense. So I am the squeaky wheel, but I wasn't at first, right? I was trying to figure like, how can we handle this? I would keep records of how many kids were coming in, where they were coming from, what supports, and be clear, like some of the places that our kids come from or have come from have closed down. And so then you're thinking about that too. Like, how do we deal with the socio-emotional stuff that our kids are coming with, right? On top of the fact that it was a juvenile detention center and nobody's processed with them. So I look at it like this. We see more on our computers daily than a person 100 years ago saw in their entire lifetime. And I see information as a digestive system, right? You know, the reason why we can't swim after we eat is because we have to give our body time to digest the food before we can go on to the next thing. And I see this process as a digestion for us. It's coming at us. We know it's coming. It's not just King, it's all of our comprehensive high schools to some extent. I think King has a larger population because we are the only comprehensive around. All of the schools around us are special admit high schools. And so we were getting this influx of kids from these different places and trying to figure out how to make them a viable part of the community. I am a big proponent for having folks see that the perception of us is not always our reality. Sometimes it is, but how you perceive us, the only way we can let you see what our reality is if we talk about our processes and our processing of things. And so we started to think about how can we integrate good practice, socio-emotional practice? How can we get our kids to communicate with us? How can we pull all of these people from these different places together and even make it easier for the case manager? Because I think at the time, Patina was our case manager. And, I know it was overwhelming for her, the number of kids coming in, this agency, this worker, that worker. And so I think the win is just recognizing that a school can do the work. We will, because when we care about our children, we're going to make it happen some way, somehow. But the win was that all of the folks in central office in those agencies said, you know what, we got to figure out, well, Dr. Bond, really, but, everybody else said, we need to collaborate and get to a point where we're all on the same page and we're communicating, because we don't want it to be that kid comes out of a facility and into a school and goes 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, even a year back into the same facility and have to go through that process of digestion again. But he never really got a chance, or she never really got a chance to process and actually let it come out the way that it should. So I feel like the win is that it's a digestive process. We have time to really understand how it's starting from the top to the bottom. We're getting this information like this, and we're actually able to grab it or bat it away into the proper places that it needs to go. So to me, that's the win, because we're creating something, we're piloting something that other schools are going to be able to replicate, not duplicate. Because I say when you duplicate something, it starts to blur after a while, right? But if you replicate it, if you keep doing it over and over again and you show other people how to build it, then you'll see that people can use the pieces that they need and still not break the mold or the model. And people keep calling me to get my mentor and case manager. And I'm like, no, I don't know how you're going to replicate these two. So, I mean, that's a win for me when other folks notice the work that your people are doing. I always feel like I'm a vessel. I'm not the person that should receive or wants any accolades. I just want for this program to work so that our kids can see that we care and that we are going to help them. And even if they do, because our recidivism rate is high as well, but at least they know that when they get here, our process is going to remain the same. It's viable. It's one that is encouraging. And it's about, again, your pathway to graduation and into life.
I always feel so inspired after these interviews. It just sounds like such an impactful program. My last question for the both of you is, what do you envision for the future of this program, both from the central office standpoint of what this looks like in other schools, but also Principal Wilkins, how do you envision this program in the future at MLK?
We are expanding our transition center, adding some more key components to this so that we're doing a lot more planning ahead of time before we place students in our school buildings. But definitely to Principal Wilkins' point, is really replicating this in other schools, right? And making sure that we're building teams in our buildings, in our school buildings that can be, again, additional school team members. Like we say central office, but I tell my case managers, you need to be embedded into your schools so that everybody knows who you are and that you are that case manager for our students. So it really is going to be about how can we replicate this in other school buildings? Because again, we wanted to pilot here. We want to continue to grow here, grow capacity here, but also to be able to replicate this in other school buildings. So not only do they have a case manager from our office, but now they will also have a mentor from the Office of Safety that will be available to them throughout the school year.
For us, I think the way I would like to see the program evolve is to actually have our students who make it through the programming to actually be kind of like transitional liaisons themselves, not even necessarily hired by the school district, but boots to ground, like peer transitional folks, right? So when other kids come back like, hey, all right, I came from here. These are the steps I took. This is how I got to this process, because I feel like we haven't gone through what our students have gone through. So we can speak to resources, we can speak to how we can assist and what things are out there, what resources, agencies and such are there and available. But to get children to be the advocate for other children, I think is the ultimate goal. I think about instruction, and that's what we want in our classrooms, right? We want the students to run the classrooms and the teachers to be the facilitators. So ideally, in the next 5 years or so, I want to see our students facilitating this process, this transition, teaching the students how to advocate for themselves, how to build communication or facilitate communication from one group to the next, or just advocate for themselves, their wants, their needs, and then helping other students to do the same. That would be the ultimate goal, I think, of this program, to have the kids run it and support and assist each other.
So thank you again, Dr. Bond and Principal Wilkins, for taking the time to talk about the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We had planned to interview Jamil Sloan and some of the students from the program. Unfortunately, with the school year winding down and plenty of work to be done, we were unable to schedule a time before releasing this episode. However, we hope to connect with Jamil and some of his students to see how the second year of the program is going sometime in the fall. Thank you for listening to this episode of Equity Is. We will be back in the fall when school's back in session. We will continue to explore more equity-related programs here at the school district, and we will also return with other episodes to expand our listeners' understanding of equity concepts. To stay up to date with what is going on in DEI, you can visit our webpage, www.philasd.org/DEI/. You can find episodes of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. The music for the program comes from Rock to the Future, a free music program for schools in Philadelphia. Thank you for listening.